It's Friday, and today, live Q&A. Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insights, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. Today is Friday, November 8, 2024. And on this Friday, as we do on each and every Friday, in which I can arrange to record a live show, we have live Friday Q&A. You call in, talk about anything you want. If you are new to a Friday Q&A show, welcome. I'm glad you are here. It's an open mic Friday. You can call in, ask any question, bring up any topic of conversation, raise any argument. The mic is yours. You get to drive the show. If you'd like to join me for one of these Friday Q&A shows, you can do that by going to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. Sign up to support the show on Patreon, and that will gain access for you to one of these Friday Q&A shows. We begin today with Peter in Massachusetts. Peter, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hi, Joshua. I am trying to figure out how much umbrella insurance I need.
Okay. What are the options? What is the insurance agent giving you?
Well, so the deal is we actually used to get this as a benefit through my job. And I would get sort of 3 to 5 million. It was very cheap because it was actually a group umbrella policy. And I had an additional million I got through my auto insurer. So I probably had around 5 million of total coverage. I haven't gotten a quote yet because I wanted to figure out how much to ask for. So that's why I don't have a quote in hand just yet.
Okay. Net worth is about how much?
3 million.
Okay. So I have never come up with a really great formula for this. Basically, kind of a minimum amount is at least to cover your net worth. That's the standard amount that I have heard about. But even that number has always been hard to figure out. Is that really true, or is that just kind of a rule of thumb? With most kinds of insurance, we have a clear formula that we can use. And so, if it's life insurance, we can do a needs analysis. If it is disability income insurance, we can do a needs analysis, and as well as, basically how much do they have. Health insurance is straightforward. All of our coverages for property, it's fairly straightforward. But the problem is with umbrella liability insurance, we're basically dealing with an unknown. If somebody sues you and gets a judgment against you for $5 million and you have a net worth of $3 million, you would wish you had $5 million. And so this is kind of a loosey-goosey guessing game because we can't really know how much liability we actually face. So the first thing I would do is I would say let's try to assess what your actual liabilities are. Do you have any reason to believe that your actual liabilities are higher than any other just ordinary person?
Well, I am a doctor, but I've got malpractice liability insurance, which is my largest risk. And that, the coverages on that are extremely generous. So the chances of blowing through that it's never happened in the history of our malpractice insurer where they've had an above limits judgment they can't cover. And this is going back, 50 plus years. So I've got that, but that's insured. Right. So I don't really, in daily life, I don't consider myself at higher risk than anybody else.
Right. So I think you do have an elevated risk because you are a doctor. Now, as you said, your biggest risk would be medical malpractice. And that's why specifically you have a medical malpractice insurance policy for that, a liability policy there. But because you are a doctor, you can't very well pretend that you are not wealthy. And so you have a slightly elevated risk as compared to, let's say, your next door neighbor who's, a construction worker. So when you cream somebody accidentally, you're out late at night and you slip your foot on the gas instead of the brake and you cream somebody. If it comes out that this is Dr. Big Shot, then now there's more of a chance that that person goes after an ambulance chaser lawyer and that you get sued than if you creamed somebody accidentally in a junky old pickup truck and I was just on my way to my janitor job, something like that. So I think you should tilt your liability insurance a little bit higher because of that. So that's the first thing is like, do we have a reason to expect that we have high liability of some kind? Somebody who has significant avenues of liability. So for example, let's say you own a business and your face is plastered on all of your company's trucks all around town, and you're known as being kind of a public figure. And you also have a bunch of rental properties and somebody could slip and fall. And you also host lots of wild parties at your house every weekend. And all these things increase your risk, your liability. And so you would want to tilt your coverage to the higher amount possible. And so I would say in your case as a physician, you would take a little bit of that, but not as much as that extreme case that I just outlined. Then they just go back, usually you go back to your net worth as can I insure my net worth? I'm not sure how to defend that other than it's kind of one of those things that makes sense. I've never understood well enough in the court process, does your net worth actually have anything to do with what's taken out against you or not taken out against you? I don't know. But what I do think is that probably in most cases, the logic of insuring your net worth is simply that nobody's going to try to sue somebody on government assistance for $8 million. But if you had a net worth of $8 million, they're probably going to try to sue you for $8 million. So I guess that's the logic there, which is what I have heard as a recommendation, and it makes sense. So basically take your net worth and look at it as an amount of coverage, and then perhaps go a little higher. The other two factors is it really is going to come down to the cost of the premium. So you're going to be sitting there looking at a quote from an insurance agent. And if you're looking at it and saying, well, if I can get $5 million and it's going to cost me an extra $300 a year, do I feel better having an extra $2 million over my net worth for an extra X hundreds of dollars a year? Yeah, that sounds good. Or no, that's too expensive. So there is just a little bit of judgment associated with it. I think you also would think about what your other forms of asset protection are. So if your entire $3 million net worth were invested in your 401k plan at work, then there would be a very good reason to say that having large amounts of liability insurance is not a necessary expense for you because you're basically protected based upon where your assets are. So it's still good to have, but you don't need as much. But if your full $3 million was invested into, a single property that you're developing that could very easily be attached by a judge if you lost a lawsuit, then now the liability insurance is more important. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a better answer. I would start with about your net worth, get a quote for $3 million, get a quote for $5 million, look at those quotes, and then just make a judgment call. I've never come up with any more precise formula for it than that.
Love it. Thank you for the advice.
My pleasure. We move on to Kevin in Washington. Welcome to the show. How can I serve you today, Kevin?
So my root question is more or less what counts as the gift money that people can give you against the total, I guess. So the situation is I'm building a house with an ADU and for my mom attached, and she's going to be paying rent, and it's going to be larger than the $15,000 a year you're allowed to gift to somebody. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious if I don't trigger something, even though she's effectively paying rent without a rental agreement, or do I need a rental agreement?
How much is the rent? What is the market rent for the house that she's going to be living in?
She plans on giving me about $2,000 a month.
Okay. And are you married?
Yes.
And is your mom married?
No.
Okay. So the first thing is, and you want this to be viewed as a gift, not as rent. Is that right?
Well, I was more concerned about going over the gift rule and on accident, if you will.
Right. So the short answer is your answer of going over the gift rule is this. So any individual in the United States can give any other individual $18,000 without incurring any gift taxes, without incurring any kind of forms, without incurring any kind of taxes. That's called the annual exclusion amount. So it's $18,000 from an individual to another individual. Husbands and wives can always split their gifts. So if you are married, then your mother can give you $18,000 and she can give your wife $18,000. And there's a total of $36,000. That's not technically a split gift, because technically split gift, I think, would be coming from who it's coming from. But in your case, it's fine. And since husbands and wives can transfer unlimited amounts of property between each other without any tax considerations, you're not going to have any trouble. So if your mom just wants to give you $24,000 a year, then have her give it to you and to your wife. And so to be technically correct, just have her give $18,000 to you, $6,000 in your wife's name, deposit them into your joint shared checking account, and boom, it's all there. So you can easily not have any gifting rules, just simply based upon the amounts and based upon the fact that you're married.
Perfect.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that was it. I was stressing about it a little bit, but it sounds very simple.
Super simple and easy. Now, what I think you should do, by the way, is I think you should think more carefully and just say, is it better for us to receive this money as a gift, or is this better for us to receive this money as a rental payment? And so, do we want to receive the money as gift? I guess the benefit there is it's just straight money coming to you. If it's a rental payment, do you want to depreciate this separate dwelling unit? I'm guessing probably the gift works fine and it's kind of simpler, but you would just want to think through that and see if there's any benefits one way or the other.
You have a 2-second opinion one way or the other?
I was hoping you were going to ask me, because I'm just doing this off the cuff and I'm just trying to think, is there anything I'm missing? And I haven't thought about this question in a while. So I was going to give you the good advice, and then you would go do the hard work and I would be off the hook and not get caught flat-footed.
I can do it. That's totally fine.
No. Let me just think it through for a moment. So sometimes what we're looking for is, the short answer is probably the gift is probably the superior option. When you have a gift, you're not going to be able to depreciate the property. But if you can just have the straight gift income from a family member, then that's probably fine. I do wonder if... let me think for a moment. So when you asked in the beginning of your question, you asked, what does a gift consist of? And so the gifting rules are not just money. Yes, that's the clearest and most obvious ones, but gifting someone, say, the use of property is still considered to be a gift, technically under the rules. So is there a reason why it would be better for you to have rental payments from your mom rather than gift income? Would it be better for you because you could gift your mother. So the goal here is not for you to try to gift your mother money. A lot of times, one of the things that we often talk about is if you want to give somebody housing, then what they should do is they should just pay you rent, and then you turn around and give them a gift at the end of the year, and they've paid you rent, and you give them a monetary gift equal to what they've paid you in rent. But in this case, you're trying to get the money to come in the other direction. So I don't see any reason why you would need to go in a rental contract or a rental payment instead of the gift. I will think more about it later when I can kind of think it through, because it's been a couple years since I've considered that question, but I don't see anything obvious at the moment.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right. We go on to Thomas in Colorado. Thomas, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Good afternoon. It's good to speak with you again. I do have a question for you, but I wanted to share just a quick 1-minute story with you, if you'll indulge me.
Please go ahead.
My wife and I took your international escape course a few years back. I remember you discussing the importance of having a passport for a big, strong, powerful, and well-known country, but also a passport from a small, quiet, and unrecognizable country. We recently received a passport from our first citizenship by investment a few months back. We wanted to use it on a recent trip that we were doing on a land border crossing from the country of Georgia to one of the neighboring countries.
Mm-hmm.
We had used the new passport to enter the country, and upon reaching the immigration officer to exit the country, she takes my new passport, looks at the cover, and says to me and my wife, where is this country? And our heads swung around to each other, and we both had a little grin on our faces. We were mentally fist pumping, remembering your earlier comments. So, anyway, thank you for that. That was that brought a good laugh to our day.
That's so funny. I love it. Thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, of course. Anyway, my question: we've taken a few other of your courses regarding privacy as well, and along with that, with some personal challenges we've made privacy a priority in our lives. We live a semi-nomadic lifestyle and travel frequently to locations around the globe with a central home here in the USA. There seem to be two extremes when it comes to privacy. One where you use Dropbox, Google, and Apple simply because they all pair together so nicely, but are extremely privacy invasive, with others, with the other aspect being where you store everything local, physical disks, and difficult to set up technology that provides ultimately an ultimate privacy, but is more difficult to get set up. My question is, how have you been able to blend personal and professional privacy, data privacy, and physical and online privacy in a way that is functional yet private as you personally travel around the globe?
So you're going to make me give up my privacy by telling you how I've done it, huh?
Just
I'm just teasing you.
Some theories.
I'm just teasing you.
Yeah.
I would say imperfectly, and let me explain. When I was younger, I didn't really have any concept of the value of privacy. And then as I started to put stuff online, I started to think about it, because I would get I've never gotten any serious threats, just always just nasty comments. And I used to, put my children all everywhere, and I share very vulnerably and personally about stuff that happens in my life. And so I started thinking about, like, wait a second, this is a different kind of set of risks. So then I got interested in privacy. And as I'm wont to do, I tend to go deep. I try to learn everything I can about everything I can find and go deep. And so I read probably a dozen books on privacy. I scoured the internet for all the latest and greatest stuff. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go hardcore. And so I went hardcore as I could in every area of my life. I had so much data and so much personal stuff out there that I knew that I was never going to be able to scrub everything out and from the internet, but I went hardcore. And again, all the way, like in anything you can think of, I went as far as I could. So I withdrew from all kinds of stuff. I deleted all kinds of stuff. I deleted every social media thing. And I found that decision to be very, very expensive. And I learned a lot of very expensive lessons along the way. So for example, little things. I had a Google account that I had had for 20 years. That was my primary Google account. And I thought, okay, well, this will be, I wasn't ready to delete my Google account. I still had a lot of stuff in there, but I thought, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and delete some of the archives. And so I went through and started deleting archives. And as I'm sitting there deleting archives, all of a sudden I get of just old emails, 15-year-old emails, things like that. I got kicked out of the account, and I lost in one fell swoop the Google account that my entire life was in for, I lost everything. That was an expensive lesson, and I've never been able to gain access to it. I tried every trick in the book. I paid for stuff, and so I learned, like, don't be a dum-dum. And I wasn't deleting the Google account; I was just clearing archives. But Google's security mechanism kicked me out. I knew my password, I knew everything, but I couldn't pass their security screen. It's been a few years now since I last tried to get in it, so I don't recall now why. But I worked on it for a long time and never got into it. I found all kinds of other problems. I all of a sudden found that I couldn't open bank accounts. So I needed to open bank accounts for a new business entity that I had. And I got declined multiple times for multiple bank accounts because I had done all this stuff with my address and what addresses were on my IDs and what addresses I reported and what was on my credit profile. And I got declined for one bank account. I happened to be in, I think, Washington, D.C., and I went to a bank. I opened a bank account. Everything was good. I because I lived outside the country at the time. So I went to the bank account. Everything was good. And I opened it. And then I get a call or an email the next day from the bank that I didn't pass their due diligence screen. And there was nothing I could do. And I had already left the United States. I needed a U.S. bank account for a U.S. company that I had. And I literally had to make a special trip back to the United States just to open bank accounts for a company because I couldn't pass the screens anymore because I had gone so hardcore, with privacy stuff. I lost photos. I did made all kinds of mistakes. And so what I have found is that you have to have some kind of clarity on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Similarly, I found that I had a lot of relationships that suffered because I became difficult to communicate with. So before I left the United States, I had gone through all of my friends and everything like that. And I had moved all of my communications with people away from just standard calls and text messages. I'd moved them all to various apps and platforms, and Signal and Wire, and there were other ones that we used back then, and WhatsApp and things like that. And then for all of this was years ago. I'm sure they fixed these problems, but for all of my normal stuff, I had a whole series of my pseudo numbers set up. And so I had all these different identities all set up with pseudo, and one was my friend's number and all these things. I had this perfect phone system set up. So I left the United States. I dumped all my US phone numbers, and I got a foreign SIM card to put in my phone. And I didn't need anything except the data access. But then the instant I put the foreign SIM card into my phone, my pseudo breaks, and I was left completely without any functional communications. And that was very expensive. Again, it was expensive in relationships. It was expensive in business. I lost business. Similarly, things like not participating heavily in social media. For a long time, I erased all of my social media accounts. I deleted several of them. One I regretted that I deleted. I was able to, after a year, finally got it back. But I deleted all my LinkedIn. I had a big LinkedIn profile. I had hundreds and hundreds of contacts and things like that. I decided I don't like LinkedIn. I deleted the whole LinkedIn thing. And then years later, I realized, you know what, Joshua, if you needed to get a job, that LinkedIn stuff is a big deal now. I never liked LinkedIn. I still don't like LinkedIn, but I would honestly say to somebody like, hey, be really careful, because maybe having a job that you get through LinkedIn is more important than not. I don't even know the number of things I've missed out on because I've missed recruiters that would have or otherwise contacted me on LinkedIn. And so other social media profiles and things like that. So I would say that I've learned that most people, I don't think that most people should go hardcore unless they have a clear reason for it, because there are a lot of costs associated with things, and you have to ask yourself, where am I in life and what are my goals? It's kind of like the way that I look at internationalization and what I tried to stress in the course that you took. Do I think that most people should leave their country? No, I don't. And a lot of it would come down to, where is somebody financially? If somebody has, let's say that we're talking about an American, and an American has a few $1,000s saved up, do I think he should hop on an airplane and go to South America because life's just going to be great? No, I think he needs to stay in the United States, get a high-paying job, and work. But now, if somebody has some significant wealth, or moving abroad is something that is really helpful for them, and they have the money to do it, then all of a sudden it's a very different situation. And so we need to look at it and ask ourselves, where are we? Same thing with privacy. Because I talk about privacy, and because I'm actually probably the most private financial planner that I think exists, because I can provide financial counseling for people. I don't take any information. It's just a phone call. People can give me whatever name they want. I can give them answers. I've ended up doing consulting with various privacy-oriented individuals. And when I interact with people who are either not rich, when I interact with people who are not wealthy, I usually will say to them, is privacy harming your financial life? And if it is, you need to seriously think about stop making privacy your number one thing, and make building financial wealth a more important thing, and give up some privacy if it allows you to make more money. I say the same thing a lot of times with regards to romantic relationships. If I'm talking to a young man or a young woman who wants to get married, and yet usually it's men. I've never talked to a woman who was into privacy in that hardcore way and wanted to get married. But if I'm talking to a young man who wants to get married and yet he's a privacy enthusiast, my first question is being a privacy enthusiast helping you in your quest for getting married, or is it harming you? And if it's harming you, I think you're much better off to give up privacy and to go after and to pursue marriage rather than to be private and be single for the rest of your life. So I go back and say, what is the reason that somebody has for pursuing privacy? Now, if, I don't know, the feds are trying to lock you up or you're being hunted by communists in your bed, you've got a pretty compelling reason for privacy. And so it makes all the sense in the world to go hardcore all the way with everything privacy related so that you can save your life or your lives of your children. Because I'm an internet, figure, then I have a compelling reason that I want to sleep well at night and I want my children to sleep well at night by protecting to the best degree that I'm able to where I live. But even that, I'll just say, even that used to be that when I was early in radical personal finance, I hosted all kinds of listeners who would come through town because I would talk about where I lived. I had all kinds of people come over to my house for dinner. I would go out and meet people at restaurants. I loved that contact with people. And then I got engaged with privacy, and it did this like weird thing to me, this weird thing to my relationships, and it harmed my engagement with my listeners. And I want to be very open. Like one of my heroes, and this is one of the reasons also I've backed off of privacy a little bit. One of my heroes personally, somebody that I aspire to be like, is the priest in Les Mis. And when you read the book of Les Mis by Victor Hugo, and you read about the priest who is just a deep man of love, a man of God who gives everything that he can to everyone around and ultimately saves Jean Valjean's life with what he gives to him. I've always admired that person. And that's how my parents are. Like my parents never lock their doors. People walk up to our house, they walk in the front door. And that's how my entire life I grew up, with constantly seeing that. And that's what I want my house to be like. And so when I became interested in privacy, then it led to this this weird paranoia where all of a sudden now, instead of me being Joshua, of who I want to be, of me opening my house and welcoming people and engaging in that, now I'm like this weird guy who's hiding from the world. And that didn't feel awesome. And that's another kind of cost associated with it. So back to the line I was going down. I think the place to start is to say, what privacy do I want and why do I want it? Like, who am I trying to hide from and why? Is this just a generalized concern? And is this not a generalized? Is this a specific thing? Do I have a specific threat, or is there like something else? And the idea behind this would be, what's your threat model? Like, what specifically are you concerned about? So for me, I'm not hiding from the feds. I'm not hiding from a government. I'm not hiding from any of that. The only thing I care about is that when I offend wackos on the internet, that I don't have to worry about a wacko on the internet, targeting my children and taking pictures of my children, putting them into fake images, putting those things online. I prefer to avoid that. I don't really care much about myself, because if somebody wants to do weird things to me, fine. But I care about my children because I have a duty to protect them from weirdos on the internet. And so that's what most of what I do is just based upon that. Now, if someone else has a different model, then you have to be much more extreme. And so, and the risks are there. So have I said anything useful to you? I've kind of gone in circles, but I guess what I'm trying to drive at is to say, I think there's a lot of benefit in saying, what specifically am I worried about? And if I'm worried about identity theft, like the course that Gabriel and I used to do together, then that's a specific thing. And there's some things I can do that are pretty simple, that aren't going to harm my other relationships, but that are going to significantly protect me from identity theft. And then try it on. Go to a level of privacy, try some different things, and then say, is this working or is this not working? The cool thing is, the difference from when I first got interested in privacy and now is that there are much better tools available now than before. So it's actually become an industry where people are inventing better solutions. And all of the really inconvenient things that we did before are now less inconvenient. And and so it's I don't know a better answer than to try it. Lay out your threat model. Say, what am I specifically worried about? What can I do? What should I do? And then how do I actually work around this? And I could give more examples, but let me pause. Is that helpful at all, or did I just talk in circles for 10 minutes?
No, it helps. I am trying to thread that needle between. This is more of just a general risk profile. I guess it would come down to two things for us personally: is protecting the assets that we have built over the course of our working careers, while also just taking some things in house and being less reliant upon people that can potentially take them away. Like your example with your Gmail. To just be more in control of our lives that way, while also not creating this veil of privacy around our lives that it pushes people away. I want to be a little more publicly invisible, but privately more wholesome, and strive
Right.
for deeper relationships that way.
Right.
It's just kind of our profile now.
Yeah. So like the email thing is a good example, right? There's really no reason why anybody needs to use Gmail anymore. Proton Mail is a world-class solution. It is absolutely outstanding. And it's real email. It's functional. It's all encrypted. It can be end-to-end encrypted if you're interacting with other Proton Mail users. And your entire archive on Proton Mail, instead of sitting there on a server, now your entire archive with a Proton Mail is encrypted. And there's really, with the exception of the fact that the search is not as good as a Gmail search, the fact that your entire email archive is encrypted while it's sitting on a server is a huge increase in privacy at a very low cost. And so this is the kind of thing that to me is an obvious no-brainer move. Right? If you imagine that somebody who lives his entire life on Gmail, and then all of a sudden he's involved in something, assume that this person is totally morally innocent, but all of a sudden is involved in something where a law enforcement officer goes and gets a warrant, takes that warrant to Google and gets his entire history of all of his emails there based upon this warrant or whatever the targeted warrant is. There's nothing that person can do to prevent that, because that's the deal. All of that email chain is sitting there in open text, and Google will hand over the file, and now the investigator with his warrant has the whole file, and now the investigator can use that in whatever way makes sense in the investigation. And I think here, I just think of things like the January 6th defendants, right? Most of the January 6th defendants, the people who got prosecuted for basically walking around the U.S. government buildings, most of them were attending a protest, trying to exercise their right to protest of something that they perceived was a wrong. And then they got carried away and walked around the building. But all of a sudden, there's hundreds and hundreds of people who are involved. And because some were violent and some were this and some were that, all of a sudden, all those little data points that were there are now subject to investigation. I would say that I don't know about majority, right? So some defendants some of those defendants were certainly morally guilty of violence, things like that should be prosecuted. But a significant amount of them committed no violence. And so I would say they bear no moral guilt. They didn't do anything wrong, but now they bear legal guilt for the laws that they broke and those kinds of things. And so when things can just change in an instant, it's wiser for you to be careful of that. So then you look at, let's take that example as kind of a simple practical example. What would be the next step of it? Well, the way that almost all of those people were caught was due to their cell phone records. So if you're walking around with a cell phone that is connected to your name, that's constantly geolocating you, all they have to do is basically draw a geofence around it and say, we're going to pool the records of everyone that's here. Well, if you happen to be there without a cell phone, or your cell phone was in a Faraday bag and you just made or your cell phone was not connected to your name, now, well, I would say that a federal investigator will basically always find you because they have unlimited resources to do so. Realistically, there's some simple things that you could do in a situation like that would keep you from getting caught up in something. Now, if I've offended people about, January 6th, people who see that as the greatest evil of all time, just imagine it happened in another country. Imagine it happened in another context. Or we go back to journalists and things like people like that who got roped into all those events. So choosing an email provider that encrypts your email archive so that when the warrant is served, the investigator gets a pile of encrypted emails, and all he has access to is basically the open header information, which is frankly going to probably be enough to string you up. At least the rest of it is sitting there encrypted. And so similar thing like my view with messaging apps. Why would I ever send a text message to somebody? I can't imagine why. Why would I ever send an open text message that's now going to sit there on a cell phone company's servers when and now be available for any warrant who goes and gets my entire text message history from the cell phone company? Why would I not just simply use iMessage or WhatsApp or any of the bazillion messenger apps platforms that are there that create one more line of investigation? But most people I don't think are well served by trying to go for hardcore privacy, because there's a significant cost associated to maintaining those structures and to doing the infrastructure. So each person, I think, will experiment, say what you're willing to do, but don't be scared, because I don't think that pursuing privacy is in and of itself a goal that leads to happiness. I think it's something that needs to serve the higher goal of the vision that you have in your life.
Yeah, and the context of this question is just to grab some of the low-hanging fruit that's easily implemented, and just implement that and then go with it on the day-to-day without turning your life upside down. So you've certainly provided some context on that, and I appreciate it.
Good. And I do think also things like international privacy, like with your traveling, a lot of your privacy stuff just becomes impossible. It's impossible. I gave an interview for on my friend Gabriel Custodiet's show. I don't know if he's released it yet or not. I did it a couple weeks ago, but we're talking about my recent trip to China and talking about it from a privacy perspective. And there's no way that you can conceal your identity in China. So you can, if you want to travel around the United States and you want to be off the grid, you can do that pretty easily. There's enough tools and enough ways to do it. You can do it pretty easily. Going to China, I don't see how it's possible in any way. Now, maybe a local expert knows how to do it. And I could come up with a few ideas that I could try if I really wanted to. But the point is that when you go to check into a hotel abroad and you're traveling, the first thing you're going to do is hand over your passport. So you're not going to be playing games with, using a pseudonym for which you don't have a passport. It's a totally different system. And that's why I've always seen the concepts of privacy and internationalization to go hand in hand. Not that we're going to try to get 5 passports and 5 different names with 5 different birth dates. That's not the goal. I mean, some people do that, and you can legally do it with the names. But that's not necessarily the goal. The goal, however, is to take some of those circumstances that otherwise you would try to solve with privacy and just solve them with these other tools. Similarly, by the way, you mentioned asset protection. As I stated in my asset protection series and talk publicly, privacy is a legitimate strategy that you can do. If you drive a modest car, you drive a Hyundai Sonata every day instead of a flashy car, you're going to have a more low-key profile, and you're going to be less likely to be targeted for your money. And so those things are going to be good, but we don't want to rely on a privacy strategy as being ultimately a real strategy that's going to work in the long run. We want to do proper asset protection planning, primarily using exemption planning or other tools if warranted by your circumstances, because those are the tools that don't rely just on privacy as to work. Those are the tools that will work regardless. But you can see that people who are private or who are modest face a much lower risk. So it's just a matter of counting the cost.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Enjoy your travels. Thanks for the fun story on them not recognizing your second country. Varner in Arkansas, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Joshua. Thank you so much for hosting calls with me. I appreciate it. First off, I wanted to thank you for the positive impact you've had on the lives of me and my family. Honestly, you are a good man, and I really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you.
The question I had, absolutely. Please keep it up. So I've kind of put together a preliminary plan, a career change plan. I'm really interested in becoming a financial advisor. It's very different than the work that I do now, but I just kind of wanted to. I've got a few kind of my checklist on things that I think I could do while I'm still in career, still working in my current job, but to start to make that transition. So I just kind of want to run those by you.
Okay.
My first thought was to start credentialing. There's some that seem pretty straightforward and don't take a whole lot of effort. That'd be the SIE exam, the Security Industry Essentials exam, and then the Series 7. It's my understanding it'd be possible for me to take those without being sponsored by my employer or an IRA or RIA or anyone else. And so that's why I thought that getting those credentials would help me be taken seriously by any potential employers. And then my thought was, get those and then start looking for opportunities with local RIAs and, then get on board and start to work and then kind of start to take coursework for the CFP at that point. Again, because I'm a career changer, I know a lot about personal finance, listen to a lot of podcasts, obviously your mentorship really, indirectly, and then start the CFP process to make sure that I'm up to snuff on doing that. I've got a vast network of LinkedIn. Go back to your previous conversation. A vast network of LinkedIn folks that I'm connected with in my current industry that I think would be possible clients. And then obviously I'd really like to work with local folks as well. So again, kind of starting the credentialing process, then start looking for a position with a local RA, and then, maybe these all don't have to be linear, but, then starting the CFP coursework would be the plan. I just want to see if there's anything I'm missing, kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Have you chosen a firm that you want to work with yet?
I haven't. I've started researching local firms, and I've shopped them in a different way. I don't have a financial advisor. I've been a DIY guy for 20 years, and but I've shopped a few times. There's been times where I felt like my situation was complex enough, and so I've had some meetings with a few. So I've gotten a sense of how they work, how they do things. But the short answer is no. I've not settled on anyone, but I'm starting to kind of get a feel for some of the local firms that could be possibilities.
Okay. So here would be my advice to you. I think the first thing that you should do is go and make a list of 10 different financial planning firms, call them up, talk to their recruiters, and go for interviews with the different firms to understand what their models are for the work that you would be doing and what they would provide to you and what they would expect from you. And what I would encourage you to do is to try to figure out how you could talk to the most diverse selection of firms that would be possible. So, for example, I think you should speak to a big company, a well-known broker, a large wirehouse broker. I think you should speak to a small local company. Try to find somebody who's just a small independent RIA. Talk to a big insurance company, a Northwestern Mutual, a New York Life. Talk to a local CPA firm. Talk to companies that are training companies and talk to companies that aren't. Go and try to put a list together of basically all the different practice models of different companies, and then go and talk to them in their recruiting departments. So remember that unlike many job applications, financial firms are always recruiting people. And so it's very, very easy to talk to a recruiter or to talk to somebody who has a recruitment goal. If it's a managing partner or someone like that. Virtually all financial firms, with the exception of a very small, stable, local firm that has two guys who worked together as partners for the last 20 years, and they've got a few staff, and they're just not interested in recruiting. They'll still talk to you, but they're not a recruiting firm. Everyone who's involved in the business has recruiting numbers that they're required to hit. They're required to recruit a certain number of new employees, new partners, whatever their firm calls them, every year. And so this is a big part of what they do. So it's a very easy business for you to sit and talk to people. And in doing that, what you need to find out is what do the firms offer to you? what would they expect of you, and what would be your pathway into the business? What would be what are you actually expected to do? The reason this matters is that it will help to guide you of, first of all, what the firm can offer you. So for example, if you go to a company that recruits a lot of new agents, new representatives, new financial advisors, then frequently they will pay and cover all of your training. And they will also have a way that you don't need to actually, you don't need to have all of your licensing stuff squared away in the beginning. And if this is something that you wanted to do, I think you're much better off to get into the business rather than to spend a whole lot of time educating yourself to that degree before you do it. And let me describe a couple of practice models. The business of being a financial advisor, in the majority of models, involves a huge amount of prospecting. Your basic skill set is going to be prospecting. And if you are successful at prospecting for clients, calling people up, asking to meet with them, talk about their money, talk about their situation, and then offer them solutions, financial plans, insurance products, investment products that fit their goals. If you're good at prospecting, then you can find that out and you can build pretty quickly. And you can learn on the job a lot of the technical knowledge that you need. So when I started, I was 23 years old. I was a personal finance enthusiast. I didn't know a lot. And basically, my company required me to go get an insurance license so I could sell insurance. Then I needed to get the basic investment licenses within the first year. But the whole beginning process was prospecting. And so I did everything with joint work. I would take a knowledgeable, experienced advisor who had all the knowledge, and I would just sit and take notes and make the introductions, and I learned about things. And that's a prospecting business. And I learned, okay, I can do the prospecting thing, and then I can go ahead and take all the classes. And so within 4 years, I had all the designations, I had all the stuff, and my company paid for all that stuff on the job. And I was able to apply it on a daily basis. And so you can make the switch much more quickly doing that. You don't have to sit and get your CFP first. You can go and see, do you like the business? Are you engaged in the business? And then get your CFP. Now, on the other hand, let's say that you discover that I'm not interested at all in the prospecting side of things. Well, then you're going to have to find a company where you can come in and be the technical planner. There are a lot of people who are very kind of like technical planning oriented, but they don't want to pick up the phone and call for and make prospecting appointments. They just refuse. They don't want to sell. They don't want to do that. Well, then it's a very different model. And that's where you have to, you would need to know that about yourself. And then you would need to engage in extensive preparation of your technical skills and technical ability so that you could get hired into a firm that needs an in-house planner, and you've got 4 or 5 producers who are bringing the clients in and you're just the in-house planner. So there are a variety of roles available for people, but you will be better off if you go out in your area and talk to the people who are at the firms that you're thinking about working in, and then test your plans with them. If I were running a firm and you tell me, Joshua, I'm thinking about paying for all my own investment licenses and I'm going to get my CFP before I start, I would say, dude, you're crazy, because you may invest several years into this process and then discover that you're not willing to pick up the phone and call people. You're not willing to prospect. And so what we need to figure out is really quickly, are you willing to prospect? And if you're willing to prospect, why don't you get an insurance license, start selling insurance, because you can sell insurance. I took a 40-hour class back in the day. With sitting in 40 hours of school for insurance school, I felt like I knew so much that I could actually help people with regard to insurance. I couldn't help people with regard to complicated investment planning, but I could help people with regard to insurance and be really useful. And since most people are dramatically underinsured, that's a really useful service. And you can really serve people effectively by selling insurance, and you can build all the skills that you will also use, 3 years later when you have all your investment licenses and you're trying to prospect for $10 million accounts. So in general, my basic way of seeing the world is try to get to the core of what you really want to do and test it as quickly as possible. And if there's a change that you think you might want to pursue, then I think you should pursue it as soon as possible. Not wait and like engage in lots of planning. I think you should go for it. And the example I use for people is, moving across the country. Let's say you're living in Florida and you think, I'd really like to live in Seattle. Well, if you think you'd like to live in Seattle and you're currently living in Florida, you should make plans to move to Seattle as quickly as you possibly can. Because one of two things will happen. Number one, you might discover that Seattle is perfect for me. I love Seattle. Seattle's a really brilliant place. And you're going to be so grateful that you're in Seattle now, that you didn't wait 10 years goofing around, making plans for someday, because now for the next 10 years, you can enjoy Seattle and you've got a 10-year head start on building contacts, on making connections, on establishing yourself in a new community. You get 10 more years of life in Seattle that you wouldn't have had if you had waited around and waited around and waited around. Now, the other thing that could happen is you find out you absolutely hate Seattle. Seattle sucks. And so if that happens, you're far better off of having jumped quickly to go to Seattle. And then after being there for a year, you discover that Seattle sucks. Well, get on an airplane or drive your car and move back to Florida. So now you'll be back in Florida and you know for certain very clearly that, you know what, Seattle sucks. And I'm really glad to be in Florida. And you're not wasting any more of your life pining over what I want to do in the future or what I think I want to do. You know it. And now you're back in Florida and you can spend that much more time in Florida, enjoying Florida, knowing that Florida is exactly where you want to be and you can build your network in Florida, build your future in Florida. All that stuff is squared away. So applying that to career changing is basically what I'm counseling you is if you think you want to go in this direction, then the goal should be to go in this direction as quickly as possible. And not to have a 5-year transition plan, but more to have a 5-month transition plan. And you're not going to get all your investment licenses and your CFP and all that stuff in 5 months. It's going to be a multi-year process. But if you think you want to be a financial advisor, then figure out which kind of firm might be a good fit for you based upon your convictions and the way you would want to structure your practice, and then go to it as quickly as possible. And then if you're going to be joining a firm that's not just your own independent practice, they will usually pay for all of that training and licensing process for you. If you're a good recruit, they'll pay for that. And now you're in the business. And then one of a couple things could happen. Number one is you could discover that you really love it. And now instead of having multiple years by yourself doing all the book work, thinking, well, I have to do all this stuff so I can go do the thing that I want to do. No, you can just go ahead and go do the thing that you want to do. And now you're building experience, you're building clients, you're getting known, you're building your reputation. And 5 years from now, you're going to be really grateful that you have that 5-year head start. On the other hand, you could find out that you absolutely hate it, in which case you're better off having gone, done it, discovered that, so that you can go back to what you're doing now or go on to something else. So move quickly and start by interviewing around with every firm that you can think about and ask them these questions and see what they would offer you. And then you'll have a clear answer as to what path you should take.
Yeah, thank you. I needed that push. Going through and kind of, looking on Indeed and seeing who's hiring, that's been a part of the process. But I needed to push to actually go out and say, hey, let's meet with me, please. I wasn't sure how receptive they would be. It sounds like, most folks in this industry are receptive and wouldn't mind, a half hour, an hour meeting just to kind of sit down and talk through my situation. So I appreciate that. I think I've leaned towards working on some level of credentialing just from some of the experiences. I kind of mentioned earlier how I was, I'm a DIY guy, but I've been, in different seasons of life, I've gone out and reached out and I've had a few negative experiences where, a friend of a friend has a guy that's, working for a firm, and he reached out to me as a prospect and we started our meeting. He immediately handed me off to somebody else that I had no relationship with. And it's because that guy, the friend of the friend, was brand new, had, virtually no training or understanding. He was just kind of the gateway into the company. And that annoyed me at the time. And so I felt like if I'm ever going to make the change and I start prospecting, which I think I would enjoy, I want to make sure I have some foundation of knowledge that I can start to add some value from day one. I guess that's why I've kind of led that way. But I hear what you're saying. There's no point in putting in years of work when you can just start doing the job and get training along the way. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. It you can balance. It doesn't have to be hardcore one or the other. I would guess that you already have all of the knowledge that you need to genuinely be useful to people. Because if you've been a DIY personal finance enthusiast, you know quite a lot that is going to be able to be useful and helpful to a lot of people. So you have to also then think, what is it that I'm going to sell? Am I going to be selling my advice, or am I going to be selling a product that is going to solve somebody's problem? So in general, the way that you help people is not in the financial business. The way that you help people is not generally by giving advice, because the vast majority of people ignore all of the good advice that you give them. Now, some people will say yes, and they'll follow your good advice, but the vast majority of people will ignore all of the good advice that you give them. So in general, most of the actual change that you're going to make in the world is going to come through selling a product. And in selling a product, what you need enough wisdom and good judgment to make certain that the product that you're selling is an appropriate fit for the needs of the client and is a high quality product. So I always go back in this example to insurance. One of the things that is different for me today, when I started selling insurance when I was 23 years old, I quickly found out that insurance agents had an inferiority complex, and that there was this like stigma about people selling life insurance. And I quickly discovered that. And I had never really been that interested in life insurance. I didn't know anything about life insurance. I didn't know anybody that had died. I didn't know anything about it. But I had always been interested in like being Mr. Big Shot, money manager. And then, so when I started selling insurance, I felt like I just got to get through this as quickly as possible so I can get to money management. Interestingly, today, as perhaps you've heard me say other times, I see it exactly the opposite. Today, the easiest thing that I can do that actually is going to actually help somebody is selling them a life insurance policy. Because if I can actually sell this guy a life insurance policy who needs, a couple $1 million of life insurance, then today his life is improved. The day I get a signed application, a check, and a physical, his family is protected if he dies. His family is protected if he all of a sudden gets diagnosed with cancer or heart disease or anything like that. I've genuinely measurably improved his family's outcomes in a huge and compelling way. So today I could go back and today sell life insurance with a passion. I could happily introduce myself and say, I sell life insurance. Would you like to buy some? Because I now have a belief and a confidence in the business that I didn't have back then. Now, interestingly, in the interim, over time, selling financial services with regards to investment planning, that thing that I thought was going to be so easy, is actually much harder for me to do than it was back in the day, because we've had the passive low-cost revolution, and now financial advisors have to work so much harder to justify the fees that we charge and justify them in actual outcomes. So I would say that things like life insurance should be, for most people, the starting point, because you're actually able to fix something broken in somebody's situation. And now you expand from life insurance to other kinds of insurance. Disability insurance, what do you need? Well, you need probably 10 or 15 hours of education about the products, about the marketplace, so you can understand. Then you can give good advice on that segment. With regard to general financial planning, most people are not going to need anything that you study on the CFP curriculum. What should most people do? Fund your Roth IRA, right? Put money in your 401k, you dum-dum. Like, obviously, this has to be step number one. You don't need a CFP designation to give that advice. So I want you to be credentialed. And my business card says that I care about credentialing. And I'm all in favor of every bit of education and credentialing that's possible. But you will not use that in the vast majority of actual real life clients' situations. Could you come across somebody who needs some kind of fancy, grat and set up, blah, 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 this sophisticated thing? Yes, you could. But they're, 5 or 10 and 100. And the other 90 or 95 out of 100, you help them by selling them a life insurance policy, opening a Roth IRA and putting an automatic draft on their checking account so that it goes in there, right? All these just like basic nuts and bolts, everyday stuff. That's how you actually help people. And then the advice, the financial plans, it doesn't take, so again, this all comes down to what market are we working in. There are very sophisticated financial planners who are solving intricate questions, right? Intricate tax questions and intricate structuring questions and things like that. It's 5% of the market. 95% of the market has to do with your ability to motivate somebody to save more money for their future, to increase their contribution to their 401k, to fund their Roth IRA, to fund a life insurance policy, those kinds of things. And it's not advanced education. So I hope I'm trying to be accurate from my experience and say what I wish that I had known, and then allow that to scare off the people who just recognize, hey, I don't want to do that, and then to attract the people who do, and just simply to say that most of what you do as a financial planner does not require a high degree of technical knowledge. What it requires is a high degree of ability to change human behavior. If you can change human behavior and you can motivate someone to reduce expenses and save for the future, or you can motivate somebody to say, you know what, I do want to purchase this financial product that solves my need, then you can fix it. And then the other thing that you just need to be a good financial planner is you need to know how to make highly suitable and appropriate recommendations for people, because all of the problems, all of the ethical quandaries and other problems come in for financial planners when they make bad recommendations to the wrong people. And when you do that, then everything falls apart. So with regard to advanced knowledge, you're always going to be doing some form of joint work. So your friend who met with you and then disappeared, that's not appropriate. Like that's not ideal. But when you get into very sophisticated planning opportunities, you're going to have a lawyer from your firm, or you're going to have a lawyer on the phone. You're going to have a seasoned professional, someone who's done lots of these, buyout agreements or whatever it is that you're doing. That's where you're going to have people working with you, and that's a totally normal thing. So I thought it was weird when I was getting started. I thought, well, I can't be the guy I got to know it all. Then once you start to know a lot, then you realize it's absolutely impossible for me to know it all. So I'm just always going to be working with people who know more than I do in this area, and that's totally cool. If there was one thing, I don't know how old you are, but if there's one thing I would go back and try to just pound into my own head at 23 years old, was that, Joshua, it is not possible to know it all. And that's the difference for me today, is that today I know that I know vastly more about financial planning than the vast majority of people. And that has put within me a confidence to recognize that I just don't know. Like earlier in this call, in this live call, when I was talking with the listener about, gifting versus gifting money versus paying rent, my brain just like froze up. It's been a long day. I'm tired, but my brain froze up, and I realized I don't have this data front of mind. So I'm basically saying I don't know. But now I'm just very confident in saying I don't know, because I recognize there's so much that, like, the more that I know, the more I realize I've got to be okay with not knowing, because this is way more than any one person can do. So be confident that, yes, you probably already know everything you need to know. And I do want you to get credentialed quickly. I do want you to study. If you start as a financial advisor, I want you to plan on working 70 hours a week. Do 40 to 50 hours of client-based work, and do 10 to 20 hours of personal study, so that you become a master at your craft. You want to do that. But ultimately, you shouldn't wait to do your career change because you don't know. You're never going to know enough. And the more you learn, the more you're going to recognize that I'm always going to be bringing people who know more than I do on advanced cases. And most of my actual impact in the world is going to be based upon my ability to listen, my ability to ask good questions, which bring people's goals out of them, my ability to cause behavior modification, to demonstrate that if you desire this goal and if you make this change, you can achieve this goal, and then to sell products that are going to solve problems for people. That's where the actual change happens, not based upon my just knowing more information.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it. Your response is incredibly thorough. You've hit on all that kind of the concerns and planning that I've done. This is actionable. I've taken copious notes, so I really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
And I'm in my almost mid 40s.
Great.
So this is kind of a midlife crisis change here. But you've energized me. I appreciate it.
It's a midlife adjustment. What you're going to love about it is, so the first few years in financial planning are really tough. So be prepared to have your work boots on. Your family needs to know you're going to be working because there's a lot to learn all of a sudden. But what is spectacular about the financial planning business is you get so many of the benefits of other types of entrepreneurship, but frequently you don't have to come up with the idea. So you get incentive-based compensation. You get the ability to create ongoing revenue from your fees on your accounts, from your commissions. You get the ability to control your schedule. You never have to ask anybody if you want to go and coach your kids' baseball team and all that kind of stuff. You get all those benefits, but you don't have to generally run, a store with a bunch of employees. You don't generally have to deal with all of those stressors. So it is a wonderful career and a really fun one. And what I valued the most and what I still think is just amazing is all the people that you meet. And if you come from the perspective of being a personal finance enthusiast and you go out into the world as a financial advisor with a genuine, deep-seated desire to serve your clients, that comes through. And that service is what people are looking for, and they'll be grateful for it. And I guess one more thing I would like to say. Recognize that you're not generally going to be serving DIYers. So there is a very difficult ethical conundrum that you're going to face. And the conundrum is that my whole life I've been a DIY personal finance enthusiast. Why have I done that? Well, because as a DIYer, I can get way better results for way less money. So then the question is, how do you ethically charge other people money for things that they could do themselves way cheaper? And even if you've resolved that intellectually, it's still hard to resolve in terms of your actual experience. I struggled with this for years. And I still am not free of it, because you ask yourself at every turn, you're like, I'm going to charge this person money. Is this person better off going to Vanguard or not? And so you need to be convinced of the value, but you need to recognize that you're not generally going to be serving DIYers. The people that you're generally going to be working with want and need help. So they're not you, they're different. They actually want and need help. And they might want and need help because they've discovered that they're incapable of doing it themselves, or they might want to need help because they've discovered that they value the service and it's so valuable to them that they're grateful and they're happy to pay more just so that they don't have to pay attention to all these details, just so they have somebody who's there kind of doing the work. So I don't want to go long-winded about that, but I do want to just say that was what I struggled a lot with as a DIYer was, can I really charge this person this money for the financial plan? After all, this was, I could do this easily. Why can't they? And I wish I had something more sophisticated to talk about, other than just to say that it's going to be fine. And how I always just dealt with this was I would always tell people, you can do this yourself, and here's what you'll do if you want to do it yourself. Here's what you should do. Here's what it's going to cost you. If you want me to do it for you or do it with you, here's what I can do for you, and here's what I can charge you. And if you're honest, you're about that, I think your clients will really be grateful that you are there with them. And that feels good over time, but it's going to be a different relationship than what you're accustomed to as a DIYer.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of transitioning folks from being supported to kind of being on their own. I like that idea. And, I'm not looking to make as much money as possible. I've followed, your lead for a long time in other podcasts. And so financially, I'm not in a position where I'm trying to make as much money as possible. I want to help as many people as possible. If that means helping them for a little bit and shifting them over to doing their own thing, I think everybody wins that way. So everything you said resonates with me. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer my question.
Good. Call me back in a year and let's celebrate your job and your success and tell us the path that you went. And I'd love to hear from you.
Got it. Thank you.
Very good, sir. All right. I had two other callers, but they have dropped off. So that concludes our live callers today. I've got some written in questions, but we're at an hour, so I think we're going to just wrap up there. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate your being there. Stay tuned this week. Exciting announcement coming on Monday of a new project that I'm doing, which I think will serve a lot of you who may, we're going to fill a niche in the financial advice marketplace that I think is underserved, of some ideas that I've come up with that I think will really help you to be able to take action on your stuff. And these are things that you can do with your financial advisor. You can do instead of a financial advisor. So stay tuned on Monday. Big announcements coming then. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with you soon.